Welcome back, Kate. Round 3, un, deux, trois of the series. And we're on a bit of a roll at the moment, which is going really, really good.
I love talking about strength training for endurance athletes because I feel like there's so much misinformation out there. And this topic that we're going to chat about today is one that I personally get a lot of questions about. So I'm excited.
Right on. Look, you get your geek face on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're really ready to roll into this one. And, periodising strength work is something that you do love. And, it's something that I've enjoyed, but also has been a challenge, I think, through the years to get it right.
Yeah.
There's 3 different areas you have to look at it, periodising it back from injury into sort of return to play. From a performance perspective, like how are we doing our strength work within back-to-back races or within season, and then also probably looking at how we're utilising the off-season to grow our strength base and periodising that through to getting ready to race.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that maybe some athletes are good at sort of nailing one of those things or getting it really right. I think it's quite maybe easier for endurance athletes to go, I know how to do my strength training in my off season because I need to work on this and this strength and weakness, etc. And this is my time to really sort of knuckle down and work on those. And it's a lot easier to wrap your head around to do that in the off season. But then when it comes closer to your racing season, like you said, you might have a lot of back-to-back races, and that's where some athletes go, I'm just going to completely stop, or they do too much. It can be really confusing. And of course, little disclaimer as well, this is very athlete dependent. So when it comes to periodizing your strength training, you need to sort of take the guidelines we're going to chat about, but then make them specific to you as an athlete as well. So make sure that, if you've done strength training for a long time, you'll be able to tolerate your strength training better. And we'll chat about, if you're new, this is probably what you should do. If you're more seasoned, then you could do this. But again, make sure you kind of trial and error a little bit of what suits you as well is really important. And also, people respond differently to strength training. You might love it, and we know that it has a huge positive effect, particularly on the neural system. Like, it can really get you amped up. It can release really good hormones as well. So a lot of people love that and they don't want to drop strength training, whereas some people also would argue they don't like it, makes them feel too fatigued. In that case, I'd say, look, have a look at what you're doing first and make sure it's not actually just what you're doing. But even if you feel like you're nailing it and you still feel a bit fatigued, you may want to go on the lower end of recommendations of what we're going to chat about as well. So quite athlete dependent.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is people, they step away from it coming into a race, then they come back to it, and then it hammers them for a few weeks, and then they're too scared to do it into the next race. Yeah. And then it's like a real negative cycle.
Yeah.
And they end up stepping away from it more and more throughout the season as they race. And then by the end of the season, they've got this big well, potential injuries that have popped up. And they've really got to work harder to come back up. And it has more of a negative effect on them than it should have.
Yeah, 100%. I see that a lot. And then people go, I tried to do strength training, but it just hurts. And it's just not for me. And it really, in hindsight, it's actually what's in the program. And it's also where they schedule it and how they go about it. You're right. Because you might go, okay, look, I know I need to still do it in between these races, but you might go, I only need one main day exercise. And realistically, that's all you need. So yeah, we can definitely get into that, and maybe in future ones we could get in some nitty gritty. But I know that we're going to go through a couple of potential case studies and kind of throughout the year kind of plans. So yeah, you can see me, I'm getting all excited.
I'm not allowed to let you dive too deep. That's the key part here.
Okay.
We're just going to keep it high level, if we would use that terminology, and then we will dive deeper in for people in future episodes.
Yes.
But I think, real key one maybe here, Kate, is let's start and let's work backwards this time instead of working forwards. Let's start around that race season and what you think should be included there, and for athletes to nail that part of the year.
Yeah. So are we talking, let's say, like a triathlete, a long distance triathlete?
Yeah, let's stick in that case.
Cool. So let's say that we have a long distance triathlete who is maybe doing like a half Ironman, and then let's say maybe 6 weeks later they're doing an Ironman. Like, would that be good?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like what people would probably do.
Something like that, right? And then in between they might do some Olympic distance or a couple of sprints if they want to, or a couple of race sims in their training, etc. So let's say that that's our general kind of case. So let's say that we go through 12 weeks, let's go through 16 weeks. Most people do like a 16-week Ironman build. So let's say that week 16 is Ironman and week 10 is their half Ironman. Okay, just to paint a picture here of our person. And let's say that they're not brand new to strength training, but they're not incredibly confident either, because that probably reflects a lot of people. So let's say that they've been doing 2 or 3 strength sessions prior to this block. And like you said, we can take a step back from there. I would say that from weeks 1 until about week 8, in an ideal world, depending on the athlete's performance and their injury history, if they can still strength train twice a week, they will continue to see significant improvements in their cycling economy, running economy, assuming that they have got their loads right and have proper exercise choices. Okay. So ideally, in that sort of first 8-week period, I would be looking at structuring their strength program to include something like 3, maybe 4 if they're particularly injury prone, what I would call activation injury prevention exercises. So I treat this as a warm up before the main set as well. Sometimes I don't like saying that because it downplays them, like they're just a warm up. They're not. It's just the point of a warm up is to increase blood flow, increase neural activation, etc. And that's exactly what these do. But they're also injury prevention performance injury
They're
prevention.
a primer.
Exactly. Right?
It's a good word for them, I reckon.
I like that, priming exercises. So I would include 3 if they weren't so injury prone, 4 if they had a current niggle or were susceptible to getting injuries. And I would pick these exercises, based on this particular athlete's strengths and weaknesses. But an example of some of these can be things like side planks, crab walks, like lat hangs, single arm kettlebell rows, etc., like those kind of exercises. I like to keep them unilateral. So because a point of them is also a bit of injury prevention. So we want to keep them single arm or single leg. So I would recommend doing something like that, and then having 2 main set exercises. And you don't need anything more than that. And I would keep these relatively heavy to get improvements in maximal strength. Of course, depending what the athlete has access to, even if they could only do home programs, I'd still try and keep them more in those lower rep range parameters, so we could still try and work on their maximal strength. And I would only pick 2 of them, and I would go for a couple of, if the athlete was up for it, like compound movements. So I would say for that first 8 weeks, they should do that twice a week. And then they're looking at their half Ironman being in week 10, so in about 2 weeks' time. So I'd say, okay, look, drop those sessions back to once a week. That between that week 8 to 9, I would say you could probably keep it relatively normal session. If you've got, say, like a 10-day taper, then you're fine to do it earlier in week 9 would be fine. And then in week 10, I would just ask the athlete, how have you been pulling up from the strength sessions, etc. And I would most likely just make them do 1 or 2 rounds of the activations, and then maybe 1 set of one of the main set exercises at like half the load. So they're still getting some neural input, but they're not creating any fatigue. And then
nice.
Yeah, something like that, so they still feel good.
Yep.
They're still getting some benefits. They're still maintaining that load and keeping used to the movement. And then they'll go do their half Ironman. And then the week after that, I'd probably just give it to them off strength training, because they've still got another 5 weeks before their Ironman. You've got to count for taper in there as well. So I would say, look, just have the next week off. Or if they wanted to do something, I would do something similar to the taper session beforehand. So then they're just getting something. And then, so that would take you through sort of that week 11. And then over the next 4 weeks, I would make this obviously athlete dependent, but I would say they could drop their strength sessions down to once a week. And that's because we know, generally research shows us, that doing your strength training once a week will maintain your strength benefits. So if they were doing big K, swim, bike, run, if they're feeling excessively fatigued, which you're probably going to feel in the lead up to an Ironman, if they work full time, if there's other life stresses going on, etc., I'd go, do you know what? Let's drop it down to once a week. Like, as much as I love strength training, doing that once a week is enough to maintain those improvements. If they are susceptible to injuries, I would say do those activation exercises twice a week. So you do the whole session once and then just top up like at home, because often a lot of these exercises are at home. I'd say, look, squeeze those in once a week more. Okay, so doing activations twice a week, so the injury prevention twice a week, main set once. And then taper off, do the Ironman. If they still wanted some really good improvement and you felt like they had really big room for improvement and they had the time and they wanted to strength train twice a week for that middle kind of 4-week block, that's great. Like, that would be ideal. Is that necessary? I don't think so. I would just say do the activations twice a week, main set once. It would be totally fine. They would maintain what they had.
Awesome. So, guys, if you are building up for Cairns and you've done Port Macquarie, then you're about in the zone.
Yes.
All right. So, if you did that as part of your race plan this year, Port Macquarie and Cairns, this is you. This last 6 weeks would be where you want to sort of slot that stuff in. If we're going to be going, sorry, you go, Kate. Go on.
Sorry, Tim. I was going to say, I think of those athletes who are doing the reverse as well, like doing Ironman Worlds. Like out of the women's is even more spread out between or Nice now and Taupo. And the men's is closer. And so they're kind of, the women's is almost a little bit harder because you've got a longer time in there and you don't really want to do it once a week for that amount of time because you don't want to maintain, you still want to improve between those two races, right? So I would say in that case, if you are someone listening or has that same spacing out, do twice a week for those first few weeks once you get back into it, then drop down to once a week for that last 4 weeks. So definitely if you're in that kind of phase, you just need to consider that. No more than 10 to 12 weeks of once a week, then you will not. And those strength benefits drop off quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So, Kate, then, if you were doing Kona and you're effectively in a bit of an off season at the moment, what's your thoughts on that period? How would you approach that?
In an off season, so like I don't have any races kind of coming up soon.
Yeah. So, say you've done your New Zealand or Australian season, you've finished early, and you're now just building back into training. You've got Kona on your mind at the end of the year. How are you going to approach that part of the season?
So I would have a think about what I want to improve on the most. What's my lowest hanging fruit? Is it swim, bike, or run? And then I would structure a strength program for the next, let's say, 6 weeks. 6 weeks is probably a good amount of time to work on a particular period of a strength program. And I would include only exercises that would focus on those goals for me. So let's say if it were me and I was racing Kona, I'd go, okay, my swim, my bike's pretty good, but I need to work on my run. So I would do a run-focused strength block, including things like some heavy lifts like your squats example, but including some plyometrics if my body could handle it to improve my performance. And I would be doing that 2 to 3 times a week. Twice a week would be enough to see significant improvements. 3 times a week would be amazing if you had the time and the effort and the energy to be able to do that. That's what I would do. And I would pick my exercises wisely where I would tie them in with injury prevention and performance at the same time. So you're building up this really robust body that can handle the load coming into your big, say, Kona build, but you're also doing something that's going to help you perform even better as well. So I would really have that focus on that. If it were me personally, I'll do 3 times a week. Very well aware that's hard. But I would do like 3 30-minute sessions. They don't have to be long.
No, they don't need to be long, and we'll get to that in another podcast as well. We'll have a chat about that and building a time-efficient program. But so I'll put you on the spot here, Kate. If you normally ran 4 times a week and gym twice, in that off-season period, would you drop a run for a gym?
I would have a look at the athlete's history. So if they have been running 4 times a week for a long, long time, then just not really getting any better, and they haven't done a lot of strength training, yes, because they may be missing out on things like improvements in musculotendinous stiffness and overall improvements in maximal strength without bulking up, right? So you go, look, you've been consistently running 4 times a week for years now, and we're just hitting a bit of a plateau. Go for a different stimulus. If they've only just reached running 4 times a week and you feel like they still have really big improvements to come from running more, no, I would say run 4 times a week, strength twice.
Yeah, nice. I like it. I think that's a really important part. Your context as an athlete is such a key part of judging what you need to do and really understanding your history and how you're actually going to make improvements forward. And the off-season period is for when you can make steps forward and really good gains and improvements. So you've really got to be diligent about thinking about more the 2 or 3 things that you can change to get those improvements. Don't think about 10.
Yes, exactly.
Really just narrow it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find people do that, or even with their strength programs, they go, I want to work on swim, bike and run, and I want to improve this and this and this and put it all in one program, but I don't have time to gym. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I just can't do that. I'm sorry. Like, we're good at picking compound movements, but you just can't do that. So again, it's just, figuring out what you can do in that. And it would be the same, say, for the bike, right? If you've got someone that's always riding bulk Ks and again, their performance is plateauing, look at a different stimulus. So there's still the principle of specificity, and I'm not saying don't swim, bike, run. Like, in fact, I just almost said the opposite. If you haven't hit that ceiling yet, but have a look at your strength training is still specific to triathlon performance. It just works in different way. It's still going to improve your performance, but have a look at, are you lacking like improving your cadence, or when you're on the bike, do you fatigue in the back end? Yes, you're going to get some benefits from long rides, but why is that? Are you missing that maximal strength there? Are you maybe struggling to get your cadence up? Do you want to get your cadence up on the bike? Maybe you're missing rate of force development, all these things. So have a justify. Do I need to do it 3 times a week? Is that your lowest hanging fruit? Is that the stimulus that you are missing? No, if it's not, if you go, actually, I could still bump in one more ride a week and I know I'm going to get benefits from it, do that, and then just minimize your strength training to still get benefits.
Yeah, and really think about what those key lifts are and being time efficient with those programs so that you're getting the maximal benefits you can out of each of those programs, rather than doing exercises that won't contribute to that performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, Kate, that's been awesome. I was going to hit you with another question around periodizing our plyometric work and amongst that, but I think we'd probably go down a rabbit hole. And because I love my plyometrics and I think it's an awesome part of it. So let's save that up for another one, and we can chat about that in due course.
Sounds good, Tim. Thanks for the chat again.
Cheers, Kate.
Bye.